Okay, I think we'll start. I think we have our panelists are here. Thank you for coming. Welcome to our second virtual meeting. I will start with, I'll ask Sharon to take the roll.
Councilmember Wengert.
Aye, here.
Councilmember Richards. Councilmember Hughes.
Here. I did see Councilmember Richards is in the meeting. He may have just not found his mute button.
Okay. Vice Mayor Derwin.
Here.
Mayor Aalfs.
Here. John, you there?
Yep, I'm here. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you. We're all here.
Yep.
Okay. Our first item of business then will be oral communications, and several of our local, some of our local partners in public service have joined us tonight. I will ask them if they just want to basically just say something quickly during this public comment. I will start by calling on Captain Corpus from the Sheriff's Office. Christina, do you want to say anything?
And you're on mute if you're trying to talk and we can't hear you.
Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening. I just wanted to reinforce that the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office is committed to continuing providing professional law enforcement services with a focus on really keeping the community safe at this time, these unprecedented times. And we're being very visible in the communities and really educating people on the social distancing and, keeping, really trying to adhere as best as possible to the shelter in place.
Thank you. And I just want to add to that well, staff in particular has been talking with the Sheriff's Office very regularly about a lot of different things. And so thank you to being as helpful and responsive as you've been the last several days.
Absolutely.
I see Roberta Zarea, the superintendent of PVSD. Roberta, did you want to say a few words?
Yes, thank you. I do. I just want to say thank you to the whole community of Portola Valley. It's been unprecedented and challenging for our families, as you can imagine, having children and young children to boot sometimes during these trying times. And our parents are really working with us as partners to implement the distance learning plans that our teachers and our staff are providing. So we completed 6 days of our 6th day today of distance learning. And as you know, we found out that the school closure notice will go in, be extended through May 1st. So now after our spring break next week, we're ramping up our 2nd phase of distance learning and providing any means of support that we can for our families and students under these challenging circumstances, particularly providing lunch. And I just wanted to say thank you to Brandy and the Farmers Market for the donations of the food boxes. We're really just so grateful for that, and I know the families will appreciate those fresh vegetables as well. So I'm available if you have any questions. Our website has good information, and we're really fortunate to have a school board that is so student-centered and supportive of all of the work that we're doing. So just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Roberta. I'm going to step in one more time and vouch for everything she just said. As having children in the school system and having sat in a couple meetings with the school board, they are definitely reaching out, and the distance learning is moving forward, and it's not easy, but it's going, and I appreciate you guys for doing that. So thank you. Finally, Selena Brown is here from Woodside Fire Protection District. Selena, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, thank you, first of all, for inviting me to the meeting. And again, I just want to reiterate what everybody else has said about the support from the community. It's been amazing. I just want to let everybody know that we as a fire district, as well as our emergency preparedness program, has been reaching out as much as possible to try to connect all the residents that want to assist in providing any skills that they may have to the high-risk population. So we've been focusing our energy on identifying who the high-risk population is. And I really also want to just let you guys know that Portola Valley has been doing a phenomenal job, but that Woodside Fire District wants everybody to know that it's not just a Portola Valley service we want to provide, that we want to make sure we cover all of our residents. We have people within all of our district that wants to help Portola Valley. So it's great to see everybody working together.
Yes, great. Thank you so much, Selena. Also, I apologize. Karen Bechtel, the chair of the PVS, the Portola Valley School District Board, is online. Karen, did you want to say anything while we're here?
Thanks, Jeff. No, I think Roberta said it really well. The only thing I might add around collaboration and opportunity as we continue to shelter in place moving forward is that please keep in mind all children are eligible to pick up food through the food programs that are available through the schools. It's not just qualifying children, and it's not just children who attend our schools. So do make sure that we continue to send people to the school district website so they can see all the various drop-off locations and know that we're going to make sure kids are fed no matter who they are.
Great, thank you. Okay, I see one hand up, and it's Mary. And Mary, if you're speaking about the PVNU item on the, is this a separate comment from the PVNU question? That was my. Mary?
She's muted. She'll need to be unmuted by the
Yeah.
whoever's in charge of that.
Myself, I can do it. Okay, there. That's all I needed to know. I think
Okay.
I'm unmuted now.
Yes,
You
we
are
can hear you.
unmuted.
Yeah, so that's fine. I don't need to be seen. We can't see anything.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Okay, you understand that. Okay.
So you had a comment, but I assume that is about the item that we're.
Yeah,
gonna
no,
pull
I
up
just
with
wanted to sign in.
Got it. Okay. All right. Okay. I think if that's the case, then we've finished with oral communications for tonight. Our next item is the consent agenda, and as I mentioned, we'll be pulling item 4 because I believe Mary wishes to speak to it. In that case, I can take a motion to approve items 1, 2, 3, and 5 of the consent agenda.
I'd like to pull items 1 and 5, please, also.
Okay, 1 is the minutes, 5 is the item 5. In that case, I can take a motion to approve items 2 and 3. Oh, sorry, Anne has her hand up. Did you want to? Okay, Mary Ann, are you moving to approve the items 2 and 3?
I am.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Craig is seconding.
Councilmember
Roll call
Wengert?
vote. Sharon.
Councilmember Wengert?
Aye.
Councilmember Richards?
Aye.
Councilmember Hughes?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Derwin?
Aye.
Mayor Aalfs?
Aye. Okay, the consent agenda passes. Item 1, minutes, Craig.
I wasn't here, so I was going to abstain as to the minutes.
Okay. Any other comments or corrections on the minutes?
Yes, Jeff, I have to abstain as well. I was absent.
Oh, right. Yes, yes. Okay. So in that case, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we actually have to have a roll call vote on these given the circumstances. So item 1, Sharon, can you do a roll call vote on item 1, approval of the minutes from February 26th?
Councilmember Wengert?
Abstain.
Councilmember Richards?
Aye.
Councilmember Hughes?
Abstain.
Vice Mayor Derwin?
Aye.
Mayor Aalfs?
Aye. Okay. Item 1 passes. Item 4 is the request by Portola Valley Neighbors United. We have a staff report. I believe we all have that. So Mary wanted to address us on this item. So Mary, I will give you the floor for this. Well, actually, before we do that, I want a quick preamble. This will be our first time taking comments on these, and we will, for the moment, be limiting them to 2 minutes at a time, just in the interest of everyone's time and just trying to make sure these meetings run smoothly. In the future, we may revisit that, but for now, we're just going to limit this to two minutes per comment. So go ahead, Mary.
Well, I want to say that we're really pleased with being on the agenda tonight and with the acceptance that we have gotten from the town and the already what we consider a rich relationship with the town in terms of our mission, which is to support and inform both the community, governance, and staff on issues of importance to the town people. And I think we've surprised ourselves by being successful and getting some momentum and getting some traction on making the general plan seem more real, both to us and to others. And we're just pleased to be part of the process here with your good governance. Maybe that's about all I have to say. We do have an up and going website, pvnu.org, with lively new editions regularly. And we're keeping an eye on a number of issues around the town. I think it's going to facilitate the process for everybody. I think that's thank you very much for considering it.
Okay, thank you. If there are no other questions or comments, then I will take a motion on this item.
I would move approval.
Mary Ann, are you raising your hand a second?
Yes, that's my hand.
Okay.
Yes,
It's moved by Hughes, seconded by Derwin. Sharon, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Wengert,
Aye.
Councilmember Richards,
Aye.
Councilmember Hughes,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Derwin,
aye.
Mayor Aalfs.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. Item 5, Craig, you had a comment on this.
Yes, I just wanted to get a little bit of an explanation or understanding from staff. Is the intention over time to have a separate restricted fund for each property that the town owns in town, or what's the logic behind creating a separate fund for this piece of open space as opposed to open space generally?
This is Jeremy Dennis, the town manager. Thank you for the question. Well, first, to start with the memo itself, this was a request from a resident through the Conservation Committee. We anticipate there to be a desire for more of these restricted funds, and it's a different type of expenditure than the open space acquisition fund supports. That fund would support, obviously, the purchase of property, whereas these restricted funds would allow for some ongoing maintenance efforts, which we certainly at the staff level appreciate. I'm speaking for Howard Young, the Public Works Director, and myself, as currently we're seeing increased desire for expenditures to bring the properties up to a certain level of maintenance and then maintain that maintenance over the longer term. We believe it matches with the council's direction last year and the priorities, and we would certainly welcome additional such restricted funds to support other properties. This was primarily driven by the interest of a resident who does wish to make a donation to said fund. Thank you.
So doesn't that reduce the flexibility though? I mean, let's say we have a whole bunch of excess money in the frog pond maintenance fund, but spring down needs some extra work. That would mean we could not spend the money that we had for maintenance of some open space on other open space. Each property would have its own separate dedicated fund that we could not use for the other properties.
That's correct, as it's slowly being constituted. We could create a restricted maintenance fund for all the properties for that purpose. My suspicion is that residents may be more interested in contributing to funds to those open spaces that they have a love for or spend time in, as opposed to a general fund. Certainly something we could revisit if the council wished to create something like that.
So I don't have any other questions, Jeff, for staff, but that does lead to some discussion I'd like to have about this, but I don't know if there are any other comments or questions or public comment.
Did any council members have a question for staff on this item, item 5? And is there any public comment or question on this item? Okay, seeing none, then we could move on to a discussion of the item. Craig, why don't you start?
Sure. I'm not sure that I'm in favor of creating these separate individual parcel restricted funds. I think that's really going to limit not just us, but future councils in future years in terms of the flexibility of maintaining these open spaces. I fully appreciate setting up a restricted fund for open space maintenance, perhaps, but doing so where each parcel is separately funded just doesn't seem like the right approach. It's, you know, I get that people might want to contribute to the park that happens to be immediately next door to them, but that's not how public services typically work. Typically, you contribute into a communal pot so that, you know, the entire community gets the benefit and everybody shares in what's there. So unless there's a particularly strong reason to limit it to just the Frog Pond property, I'd be much more in favor of make it generally for maintenance across all of our open space properties. With the I forget what the other fund was that we created last time for the little sliver next to the Frog Pond open space. That one, there were already significant commitments to fund something that was very specific, and I think that's why that one was a little narrower, although I still don't fully understand the logistics of that, which is why I think I abstained from voting for it at the time. I'm just very wary of the path that this is going to lead us down if we have, I forget how many properties we own, 35. If we have 35 separate maintenance funds for each parcel of land that the town owns, that rapidly becomes unmanageable.
Jeremy, did you want to comment on this?
Sure. Again, the ask came from a particular resident who, I don't want to speak for them, but my general sense was that this would be a contribution that otherwise would not be made if it was to something more general. This approach certainly could benefit from a broader council conversation. It has similarities to the types of programs you see in larger cities, parks and rec programs where people will buy a bench or support a tree or do those kinds of things. So it's not unprecedented. I would also speculate that we could create a program that would allow residents to support a handful of priority open space properties. The majority of the properties that the town owns are not necessarily in what we would call a classic open space. So whether or not they'd be eligible for this, could be another conversation. So that just additional information for the sake of this discussion. Thank you.
Anne, you have your hand up. Why don't you go ahead?
I think that Craig has a very valid point here in the sense that what occurred to me as I read this report was that the time to consider the establishment of the open space, a specific Frog Pond Open Space Restricted Fund, should come at the time that the council discusses the following 3 items on the second page of the staff report. Because where I was uneasy was the open-ended nature of the potential expansion of that open space. And I think there's a lot more to discuss relative to that. I know there were many discussions that occurred during the road remnant discussion. And I think the two got merged in a way that we may not fully understand. So I appreciate Craig's point that designating this for a restricted fund specifically now for the Frog Pond, just the Frog Pond, given that we're going to be looking at other issues surrounding the Frog Pond going forward in the 3 items that are on your second page. To me, it makes sense to potentially take this step at the same time as we have done that next set of work, or not take it at all. I mean, again, not saying we wouldn't consider it, but I think the time that's more appropriate for us to consider it would be after we've completed all the work that you outlined.
Okay. Why don't we hear from John? Craig, I'll let you respond in a second. I'm just curious what John has to say.
Yeah, I think there's some good points being made here regarding the difficulty of potentially having a separate fund for every open space in town. I like the idea of maybe setting up more of a programmed approach with a certain set of open spaces that we might be able to single out in some way, rather than just saying, no, you have to donate directly to everything or nothing. Because I do think that Jeremy's right that some of these donations are targeted and might not even happen without that option. I mean, that was all I wanted to add at this point.
Thank you. Craig, did you want to have something to add to that?
Yeah, I was just, it's a question for Jeremy. I think the dollar amount that you're talking about for this one particular pledge, is that something that would probably be consumed fairly quickly if we were doing some of the work that Conservation Committee has asked us to do to kind of bring the park up to kind of their basic level? In other words, if we were to create this specific fund now, get the contribution into it, would we likely be spending it down pretty quickly anyway? And then if we created a more general fund later, we could try and direct other contributions to the general fund, not the general fund, the more general open space maintenance fund. But that this one essentially we could create sort of temporarily until we get the broader work effort done in order to collect this contribution. And then we would probably run it down and move to a programmatic approach as has been suggested.
So I would certainly wish to wait until the committee's efforts around the vision statements for the open space properties was completed before we contemplated expenditures out of any restricted fund for an open space property. So that first statement. Secondly, yes, I think that monies would be spent fairly quickly. Depending on what level of maintenance we're talking about, and whether or not there's some pre-maintenance work that needs to occur. So that would be I would anticipate the money going fairly fast.
Okay, I think my earlier comments around really preferring to see a more unified fund that has greater flexibility really matters if it's going to carry a balance. If we're collecting a contribution that we fairly soon spend for a specific project in a specific open space, then it's less of a concern because you're basically passing that money through pretty quickly. It's really if we're looking at something where we're establishing a long-term pool of money to fund ongoing maintenance efforts, that I have the sort of bigger concern about wanting to have flexibility, because some open space properties will need more than others in different years.
John, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I think good point made by Jeremy that I expect the funding, after discussions in the Conservation Committee, it looks like the funding for bringing Frog Pond and that area up to speed would take a substantial amount of money. So I don't think that's an issue at all.
Craig, go ahead.
I was just going to say, unless there's further discussion, I'd make a motion.
Mary Ann, did you want to say anything on this one?
Now I'm a little confused. What, are we voting on the original number 5 recommendation, or are we voting on something else?
My motion was going to be number 5, as was in our packet.
Okay, I have nothing to add to that.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, moved by Craig, seconded by John. Sharon, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Wengert,
Nay.
Councilmember Richards,
Aye.
Councilmember Hughes,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Derwin,
Nay.
Mayor Aalfs.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. That brings us to item 6, which is the update on COVID. Jeremy, this is yours.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Aalfs and members of the council. So what I wanted to do in this update, and it should take about 10 minutes or so, is provide the latest information that we have, primarily related to the town, but a few updates at the county level. Please take any questions or comments you may have. Obviously, this information is changing fairly rapidly, and I hope I have everything correct. So let me start with the town updates. As I think everyone has seen, there's been a significant amount of communication from the town to residents. That communication is coming primarily through the mayor, and the mayor is developed a system. We started it yesterday, where there will be daily roundups of important information that we've learned, and questions to any answers to any questions that either the mayor's received through email, or we've seen on Nextdoor, PV Forum, or other places. If there's additional information that needs to get out that either isn't as important as that roundup, or there's a time sensitivity around it, the staff will continue to push that out. We are regularly updating our own website. Not all that information is pushed out through the normal channels. So would recommend to residents to always check our webpage. It's the red banner on the top, and click into that item, and it gets continuously updated. I want to thank publicly Carrie Chin, who's hosting this meeting. She's the communication and community engagement analyst, and Brandy DeGarmo, the assistant to the town manager, for all of the work that they put into ensuring that the most amount of information is getting out to the most amount of people. That's included setting up conference calls with a variety of interested parties in town, making this meeting possible. As far as I know, we're the first community, certainly in San Mateo County, to have a meeting that allows residents to communicate live from a remote location. So thank you to them. A quick update on construction. As you know, we are in day 3 of our construction suspension. This was obviously a difficult message to send to the community because of the impact that it would have. I'm very happy to say that the construction community and those residents impacted by the suspension have been very positive in their comments back to us, and understanding in what the council has decided. It's an approach that has been duplicated in other cities. Atherton, Menlo Park, and last night Woodside all implemented what I have heard called by many of these cities the PV model. So that is occurring. We do have a few life and safety construction items happening. If residents have any questions, please contact me or Laura Russell, the planning and building director, or her staff. We can provide that. For projects that we expect to go on for a bit of time because of their nature, whether they're significant erosion control projects or life and safety kitchens, we have attempted to the best of our abilities to communicate with the residents around that project so they know what's going on. The Windy Hill, wanted to talk a little bit about that. As the council knows, on Sunday, I issued a temporary parking restriction in and around Windy Hill. The reason that I issued this was we were seeing significant life and safety issues related to parking actually in the street in Upper Alpine, some concerns with bicyclists coming through. The interactions that I understand the sheriff's office, my team, and others were having weren't always positive related to social distancing. And we wanted to help with that. So that was our goal with this temporary order. I've been communicating with residents on Willowbrook. I want to thank Lori Duvall, who coordinates our neighborhood watch programming, to connect me with some folks there and making sure that they know they've got someone that they can come to if there's any issue. Those communications have been very positive. The Willowbrook community, all the people I've talked to, understand that there's a regional asset that's just outside their door, and the challenges that can come with that, but also the benefit from being close by. And my sense was that our order was appreciated and understood. There's certainly going to be more to come on MROSD, that's Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District. They're the district that operates Windy Hill, on what they do in the future. Today, they issued a new set of regulations that are available on their website that really speak to the need for social distancing on the trails. It was titled "Help Us Keep Our Parks Open," which is quite a message to send. I know that the state, I know the county, I know all the cities are really struggling with this. Many of you may have seen over the weekend the impact visitors had on the coast as it related to the beaches. Not only was it a life and safety issue with social distancing, parking, and the like, apparently many of the businesses on the coast, particularly those that are that sell grocery stores, convenience stores, a lot of stuff was purchased as people left, which leaves those communities in a bit of a pickle. So I think there's going to be a lot more to come as it relates to parks and beaches and the like being open. The managers have started work on a project to examine thoroughly the impact that the shelter-in-place order has on our finances. There's two components to that. The first component is we're sure to see decreases in revenue streams. So examples of those include sources like sales tax. They include sources to support the planning department in the activities that they do for permit processing. Certainly impacts from funding we would receive, revenue we would receive from events in our facilities, classes, and the like. There's also our expectation that there will be a number of expenditures that won't occur as a result of the shelter in place. So certainly projects that have not been started in our CIP, certain expenditures for consultants and the like. So within a week, the finance team is going to provide me with the estimated range of impact of this shelter-in-place order, which then we will consult with the subcommittee created last week by the Council of Council members Wengert and Hughes on that, and we may have something to bring forward to you. There's a question that the staff is currently discussing as it relates to whether or not spring quarter is even possible for our classes, and whether or not leagues, once when they start, what that will look like as it relates to our fields. We are certainly inclined, going backwards, to allow for a season that goes later than we would normally have on our fields, and we'll work with the leagues to talk about that. For the classes, we're still in a holding pattern a bit. Our suspicion is that this order may continue from the counties for some time. We'll see what happens. That will definitely impact classes. So we're considering what a truncated spring quarter may look like should we get things up and running again. And I'm eager to hear from council members if you have any thoughts around that. The farmers market, the pickup opportunity that was created in the last week has been very successful. The latest numbers that came to me just after this meeting started, let me go through them. There were 150 basic veggie bags sold. They were sold out completely. 123 specialty veggie bags, that was sold out. There were 52 donated bags, and as Roberta Zarea from the school district said, that those bags are being donated to the families of those kids who come to PVSD from outside of the community. So very proud of that. 100 pounds of ground beef was sold out. The food essentials bag was not sold out. We suspect that part of it was that there wasn't a picture that was available for people to really understand what was in there. May have been other considerations. We worked with our vendor to, instead of the town covering the costs of the bags, to actually simply cover the cost of the administration, and any leftover bags for essentials will be taken back by the farmers market and sold. We don't need to cover that cost. A big shout out to Brandy and then Niall and Lauren with the farmers market for creating the program. We're delighted that residents seem to be interested in it and participating in it. We've gotten a lot of emails thanking the team. It's worth noting here that there are restaurants and other businesses open in Portola Valley. We hope that you are going to them for takeout needs. I've checked in with all of them over the last week, and they're eager to have your business, so please continue with that. I have a couple minor updates on the town front and a question. There is a PG&E scam that is going around that some residents emailed me about today, asking residents to keep their side gates open for access to look at meters. That is not a real PG&E email. We'll be putting something out about it if we haven't already. I have a question for anybody listening on AM radio right now. If you are listening on AM radio, we'd love to hear back from you. We aren't able to determine how many people are listening, so that would be helpful for future meetings. So if you hear my voice on AM radio, please email me tomorrow and let me know that's how you heard from us.
And looking for ad revenue here, so please get our ratings up.
And finally, I just want to generally say that the staff is doing well under extraordinary circumstances. We went from working in a building together to everyone working from home, except for Public Works. I'll talk about that in a second, in a week. And I think it's been quite the transition, but everybody's in good spirits. It seems to be working well. And a thank you to everyone on the staff for making this something to be proud of. Public Works is on the ground in town doing life and safety and the like. They're continuing on the 980 work schedule, where the rest of us are back to a Monday, Friday, 8 to 5 working from home. So thank you to Howard and his team at Chuck, Scott, and Justin. They were the ones out at 6 a.m. putting out the parking signs. They're the ones, when they see teenagers playing on our fields, asking them to social distance. So they're on the front line. So thanks very much, guys. Just from the county perspective, there were a few things that I understand have happened recently that I wanted to share with everyone on this at this meeting. the county did ban evictions, and this applies to all 20 cities. The county did create a program called San Mateo County Strong. It's a program that would take donations for residents, nonprofit organizations, and small businesses that are particularly hard hit by the outbreak. The county did seed $3 million into that. If there's anyone who's interested in donating, this is money that will stay 100% in San Mateo County, smcstrong.org. I also understand that the county this afternoon issued new guidance on the park system and really much more social distancing, anticipating more parking lot closures for the county park systems. There are some parks that are already closed, like Flood Park. So that's occurred. The county will continue, obviously, to meet and issue new guidance. The county health officer yesterday issued some very strong guidance around visiting recreational opportunities. And to paraphrase what Dr. Morrow said was that he is not recommending people travel to recreate because of the impacts I described earlier. So I thought it was important to state that. That's my update. I would, if there's anything that I can answer, any questions from the council or the public, or anything that you think we should be considering, I would be delighted to hear from you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy. So I'm just going to explain how we're going to do this. It's not going to be that different from how we handle this in live meetings. I will take questions initially from the council to Jeremy. Then I'll ask if there's any public comment, although this is not, it's more of an update than an action item. In general, I will take public comment, and then we can have a final discussion among the council. So with that, I will take, John has his hand up. John, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, actually, all I wanted to say was I wanted to thank our mayor for doing a great job in the community messaging. I think he really managed to hit the tone very well over the last week or so, and so good job, Jeff. Thanks.
Thank you. Craig, did you want to say something?
Yes, similarly, I don't have any questions, largely because of how well informed Jeremy has been keeping us, I think. I just wanted to add, my commendations to Jeremy as town manager for staying on top of all this stuff, to the long list of staff that he mentioned before. I think the staff and Jeremy in particular have been doing a tremendous job despite this kind of completely unprecedented circumstance. And I agree with John, Jeff. I think your emails have been, not just good in content, but I think the right timing, the right amount of information. They've been very well put together.
Thank you. Thanks for that comment. Any other questions from the council? Anne, go ahead.
Yeah, I certainly echo the comments that you both just made relative to your role, Jeff, and the tone of the messaging and the amount of it, et cetera. And obviously, similarly with Jeremy. The one other question really I had came from today's briefing. And it was one related to, and I know, Jeremy, you weren't part of this briefing, and I'm not sure whether you received the same, but I know others of this group were on that call today. And it was when there was a discussion by Charlie Crocker of Zone Haven, of the maps that we have seen before that he's developed for the evacuations, the establishment of evacuation zones throughout the county. And this was originally, as you probably recall, done for wildfire evacuation. But what was said in today's discussion, for those of you who didn't hear it, was that there had been a pivot in what they had been focused on since the COVID-19 outbreak. And they had pivoted to really creating and modifying these maps to provide more information to communities, all the affected communities in San Mateo County, that includes medical, social services, food, and then the final category, which was Parks and Rec. And it was really to that last category that obviously links very closely to the discussions we've been having here. So as a further sort of follow-up, I think on the COVID side, I would certainly request, and potentially this is probably in your court, Jeremy, that we look into that portion of it. He didn't describe that today because I don't think there was time in that very large county-wide meeting that happens daily to go into each of the categories. He quickly referenced the first three, but what was clearly there as well on his map was a Parks and Rec portion of it. And so clearly, in my mind, that's the one that's got the greatest. I think it's a terrific potential tool because it'll identify the places for people to go in their respective communities for all of the things that I just mentioned. But I would want to have some follow-up, certainly on our part, to make sure we understand what they're posting on the Park and Rec side.
Yeah, thanks, Ann. That was a good, that presentation was good. We should take advantage of it. Craig, go ahead.
Yeah, so I agree with Ann that we should find out what they're putting as far as Parks and Rec stuff for, people far afield recommending that they might come, travel long distances to come here. I clicked around, they gave the URL for the site and I was clicking around and looking at the information. I suspect that for Portola Valley, because we're fairly small, and although for fire evacuation purposes, we're split into multiple zones, for COVID-19 purposes, the same information pretty much applies across town. I'd say it would be better to have a link which is already there from that Zone Haven site to the town's webpage, and then focus our activities on making sure that has the most relevant information for our people. I think, frankly, I appreciate what they've done with the Zone Haven tool to repurpose it for this. I think it's probably might be more useful in denser communities where they, knowing what restaurants are in your immediate neighborhood makes more sense. In Portola Valley, we have like 3. So it's and it doesn't matter which of the 6 Portola Valley zones you're in, it's the same information. So I appreciate what they're doing, and I think it might be useful for other parts of the county more than ours. And we should make sure that they're not putting information in for other parts of the county recommending that they drive all the way to Portola Valley to park their cars and hug each other on the way in and out of Windy Hill. But I think in terms of informing our own residents, I think our own town website is probably a better tool for that.
Agreed. Jeremy and Cara had their hands up. Jeremy, why don't you go ahead and respond?
Just very briefly to respond to Ann, I will reach out to the chief tomorrow. It was not a specific topic of conversation, so I will learn more from him then. Thanks for bringing it up.
And Cara, your hand is down. Did you not want to respond? Okay. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Cara Silver, Town Attorney. Can you hear me? Okay. So I also heard the presentation, and I think that it was intended also for local agencies to make individual comments. And so it might be an appropriate tool for you to specify any of the parking restrictions that apply to the parks or to the trails in town.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. Okay. Ann, go ahead.
Yeah, just again, my main point was not relative to the other resources. It was really related to the parks. And I think Cara's idea is a very good one, because certainly having that being used by a broader group of people outside of town and clearly throughout the county just potentially increases the possibility that people will in fact look to see, well, where are parks and where can we go? And that was my concern, to make sure that we were sort of not crossing purposes on any of this.
Yeah, agreed. We'll need to do some outreach on that question. Okay, I don't see any other hands from the council right now. I don't see hands up from the public, but if anyone does have a comment or question, I'll take it right now. Okay, there's one. Lori, go ahead. Is Lori unmuted?
I've allowed her permission to talk. She needs to unmute herself now.
Oh. Lori, can you unmute yourself?
Oh,
There you are.
hey. Thank you, guys. No questions. Sincere thanks. We got this.
Thank you. Thank you. Doing the best we can. Okay.
That's all.
If there's no other comments from the council, then we'll move on. Does anyone else want to comment on this before we move on? Okay, if that's the case, we will move on to item 7, which is the recommendation of adoption of the 2019-2020 street resurfacing project. Jeremy, why don't you start this one off?
Thank you. So there's going to be 2 components of our presentation. One is going to be from Howard Young, the Public Works Director, and that is the nuts and bolts of what we're proposing as it relates to a resurfacing project. And then once Howard's completed that portion, there may be some questions related to what's in the bid package. Then I will provide a overview of our thinking on the project in the light of everything that's happening right now, and talk a little bit about what it means if the council does approve this, opportunities to do something a little bit differently if the council wishes to do so, and I think other important aspects to it. So Howard.
Thank you, Jeremy. Hello, I'm Howard Young, the town's Public Works Director. Mayor and members of the Town Council. Of course, please note first that this report was kind of planned and assembled prior to the COVID-19 related shelter in place. Can everyone hear me fine? Hello?
We can hear you, Howard.
Yes, we hear you.
So what we have before you is a recommendation to approve the annual plans and specs and to advertise to bid for this year's annual resurfacing project, which will consist of base repairs and a slurry seal. It also includes traffic improvements related to the council approved pedestrian safety study for efficiency and savings. More on that later. The streets selected this year was using the town's pavement management system as a guide, as we always do. The streets selected for treatment are shown on attachment 1. If I can ask you to please turn your attention to the attachment 1 in your report. Okay, there it is on screen. There's a base bid project that includes our normal project, the number of streets listed. In addition to resurfacing limits, there are 3 locations within the resurfacing limits that includes items identified in the pedestrian safety. We'll be doing those at the same time for sufficiency and savings and to avoid duplications of effort. Bid item 1 includes 3 streets if bids come in favorable, and which would help us fully utilize the budgeted amount. Once again, this bid alternate is only used if the base bid comes in lower than the budgeted amount. Additive bid alternate 2 is what's different than the typical year's bid packages. This item here contains 6 locations outside of resurfacing limits for traffic improvements related to the pedestrian safety study. We feel that this coupling the project together provides efficiency and cost savings. If elected, this item will be charged to the appropriate place in the adopted budget. I do want to mention that the pedestrian safety improvements were budgeted in this fiscal year's adopted budget. I want to mention about the 6 locations identified here in the bid alternate 2, that these locations are considered the easy, low-hanging fruit locations that are basically just signs and pavement markings that are included in the palette of, they were a palette and template of signs, Caltrans standard, that went to the ASCC. They are not the difficult sites that involve further outreach and engineering. So I also have Paul Krupka, the town's consultant traffic engineer, available for any detailed traffic improvement questions. So moving on, the report also contains a proposed schedule and fiscal impact. Again, this report was originally assembled prior to the COVID-19 shelter in place, which may affect the bidding and construction environment. And those items aren't known yet because the situation is so fluid. As we go through this process, I can provide updates through the town manager. So that concludes my portion of the presentation. I welcome any questions on the technical aspects of the report. I do want to note that there are 3 recommendations in the report related to project bidding and authorizing the town manager to execute contract and change orders and bid alternate as standard in the past. I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Howard. Jeremy, go ahead, comment.
Just to say, again, we're happy at this point to take any technical questions, and then I have a number of broader comments on where this project lies within what we're doing in the COVID environment. Thank you.
Thank you. John, you're next.
Yeah, I just wondered, Howard, if we know whether or not our usual bidders are operating at the moment, and we'll be in a position to bid on this, given this circumstance.
I could tell you some are still open, and some I've called, provided the standard voice message that they're closed due to COVID-19.
Okay.
Okay, Anne, go ahead.
Yeah, Howard, you said one thing that I wanted to make sure I heard it correctly. You mentioned that the alt bid 2, which is the 5 or 6 locations from the pedestrian study,
Yes.
were included in this year's budget. Is that right?
Yes.
So were they included in your budget? I mean, I'm not quite sure what that means exactly.
They were included in the adopted budget. There was a line item in the CIP adopted budget.
So why wouldn't they be part of the base bid? That's, I guess, what I'm trying to figure out. If they were part of our adopted budget.
It provides an option for us because it's not part of the base bid because they're not within the surface area, resurfacing area. And I wanted to separate those costs out to provide a known number of what those are going to be. But mainly because they're not included in the base bid because they're not within the resurfacing limits.
Okay. I guess I understand that, but I'm trying to make the distinction of why they wouldn't be. Were they a separate budget item from your?
Yes, they were a separate.
Separate budget item from your resurfacing budget.
Yes, they were a separate item from the resurfacing budget.
Okay. And then the only other question I know we had talked a lot about in the past is since sections that are in this projected base bid locations for the regular slurry seal, is the plan on the Portola Road sections to do the rolling that on the shoulders as had been discussed in the past?
Yes, yes, that is.
Sorry, and so my next question was that also going to happen on any of the other, Westridge I know was one of the main arterials we talked about, or is that, what's your thinking on that part of it?
Whatever we approved in the past of rolling the arterials, that's what was included in the bid package, Portola and Alpine. But we can certainly also include any other streets for rolling also.
Understood. Thank you.
Craig, go ahead.
Yeah, I have 2 questions. One is a question that I think comes up every year, which is this is obviously happening during the summer, and estimated completion is going to be into our next budget year. So just to refresh everybody's memory, including mine, does this all get charged against this year, even if we don't make the payment to the contractor until completion, which is next year, or does this roll over partially into the next budget year?
So we did not anticipate it rolling over. Last year was a little different year because we held off on the paving project due to discussions about paving and how we're going to pay for it and PCI. This year we're kind of on target to finish by end of June. It's basically conservative to the first week in July. So when the actual work gets done in June, you can actually accrue back because the work was actually finished in June.
Gotcha. So the July 10th is just being a little conservative, but you expect it should all be done in June.
Yes.
Okay. And then the second question was just on the technicality of this alternate bid 2. So the intention would be that we do the base project, we would do alternate 2 no matter what, because that's budgeted separately, but that alternate 1 would only happen if the base comes in under the estimate and we have room in the budget to do alternate 1. So alternate 2 it's really sort of a second base, which I think is kind of what Ann was getting at. It's separated out for clarity to make it clear what the number is, but it's really, the intention is we would do alternate 2. It's not dependent on what the bid comes in at for the base bid.
That is correct. And the bid alternate 2, to separate it out also kind of brings it up the topic for discussion at the council level, so that the council is aware that we are, and the public is aware that we are moving forward to do these things.
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Jeremy, you wanted to make a comment?
Yeah, just to speaking to Craig's point and what Howard was describing, you know, we do things a little bit differently with our roads. We tend to go to bid a little bit earlier than other cities, which has meant that we budget for roads projects to happen at the end of our fiscal year, where other cities tend to do it at the start of their fiscal year. If we were in a normal year, one of the things that we would be discussing is altering that, because it has caused some accounting challenges in the past. If you're doing too much work in the next year, then you should be budgeting in that year. So that's something that we anticipate bringing to council during a normal year during a budget discussion. What that would theoretically look like would be that we would skip a year of work for road resurfacing projects, and then do it the following year at the very start of the year. That's not a topic we need to discuss tonight, but to your point, Craig. Thank you.
Okay. Craig, go ahead, and then we have one hand raised from the public. Go ahead, Craig, and then I'll call on Christy.
Okay. Yeah, I had one follow-up question, which is just when the bids come in, are they tied to this schedule? In other words, if we put this out to bid, we get the bids back, are the contractors basically committing to a particular start date and end date with that, or is the schedule flexible? In other words, if we got the bids in and we say, oh, because of COVID, we want to delay this by 3 months, would we need to rebid it, or would those bids still carry through?
So the specifications indicate that the bids are good for 45 days. And so there are some public contract code items related to that question.
And is the 45 days flexible? In other words, can we change the 45 days, or is that not flexible?
I'll have to look into the public contract code and get back to that. I don't have the exact date right now. But it establishes something fair for the contractor, so they can basically have some kind of organized workforce and schedule for the rest of their work and the rest of their year also.
Yeah.
But certainly once we open the bids, we can negotiate a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
Cara wanted to make a comment.
Yes, so my understanding is that you that the Public Contracts Code does allow you to advertise in the bid a longer guarantee price date. So for instance, you could, specify that the price shall be good for, say, 4 months or something like that. However, then it would be likely that contractors would, bid a higher price because of, the longer the price guarantee period is. But that is an option for council if you wanted to do that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Christy Corley's been waiting. Thanks, Christy, and you're up. Christy? Oh. You might have to unmute yourself, Christy.
Can you hear me now?
There you are, yeah.
Go ahead. Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. I'm just wondering on the bottom of Golden Oak, if you're planning to do that flat area across from the crosswalk.
Howard?
Yes, okay. So that is not the Golden Oak in front of the Alpine Hill Swim and Tennis Club. That is one
Yes,
of the more.
a lot of AT&T, PG&E, everyone's parking there, and it's not in good condition as far as the road's concerned, and wondering if you're planning to resurface on the corner of Golden Oak and Alpine across from Alpine Swim and Tennis.
So that area is going to be slurry sealed according to the list right here, and we'll make we'll make any repairs necessary. But this is not an overlay. This is just a slurry seal. But we can look at the shoulder at that time and determine where the property lines are and address it then.
That'd be great, right across from the crosswalk. That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Christy. If there's no other public comment or questions, then I can we can continue the discussion, or I can entertain a motion on this. Go ahead, Jeremy.
I wanted to provide some additional context for the item in front of you, if that's okay.
Yes.
Great. So I think the first thing I wanted to do is to acknowledge that life has changed fairly radically in the last few weeks, and we don't know what the future holds for us. And in the conversations that Howard and I were having about placing this item, and then subsequently with the mayor and the vice mayor as part of our discussions, I mean, there was certainly this sense that, is this the right item at the right time? What message does this send? We're not pretending that suddenly in a couple weeks things will be normal again, but in order to potentially do the things we normally do, we wanted to start this process off. So I think that's important to say. There was definitely recognition of how peculiar this all is. What this ultimately commits to is that there would be an expenditure of Howard, if I get this wrong, I believe it's about $70,000 or so for design and the like. We would then get a bid or a number of bids. At that point, as with any other year, what the authority that typically gets granted to the town managers, we would make a decision. If you recall, last year, one of our concerns were that so many firms that do this work were getting quality work in other places, large jobs, that the bids may come in and be so outside of what we thought that we would decide not to do a project. So there's an authority that's within this this request that the town manager has at a point to make a call on whether we would move forward or not. Clearly this year, it's a very different environment that we're operating in. As I was describing earlier in my COVID update, as it related to the finance work that we're doing, we understand that there will be impacts on the revenue side, and there will be things we don't do on the expenditure side. And as I've described to the interim finance director and her staff, anything on the expenditure side that's general fund dollars that we haven't started is going to be, if you will, fair game to assist in any financial hit that we take from all of this. Most of the money for these road projects comes from non-discretionary sources. So they're either very specific to road, exactly these kinds of projects, or right-of-way work. There's, Howard, again, if I get this wrong, I think it's about $120,000 or so of general fund dollars, because we do support it. But the rest of the money comes from funds that we receive from the state and other sources for this work. Is that correct, Howard?
That is correct.
Thank you. So the there are issues that certainly come from potentially not moving forward, but they're all issues we can handle. And for transparency, I wish to state them, not to sway the conversation, but just so there's clarity on what that looks like. The state does have requirements around a maintenance of effort that I think every city's going to have a problem with here. So I suspect that there will be issues later. For those of you who don't know that, we're required to contribute a certain amount of funding towards these types of projects. The state does not want us to rely solely on their funds to do that. Again, I suspect every city's going to be dealing with this, so I don't think we'll be in a unique situation. And I would certainly articulate to the state that if they're telling us that we didn't do the MOE in the way that we should in the past, there's been extenuating circumstances. We use, as per our right, some of these funds to support salaries for Public Works Department. This is, again, an issue that we can deal with, because if we didn't move forward in the project and the state was asking us to pull money back, we would make budget amendments that would support our staff. But just for full transparency, I wanted those to be out there. If, given the circumstances that we're in, the council can certainly ask for this item to come back at some point if there's a desire to have some increased level of oversight. We're committed at the staff level to provide, through the subcommittee that's working on finance issues, our analysis of impacts on revenue and expenditures. And if we need to delay things, we certainly will do that, either through council direction or under the town manager's authority. We can certainly do things later on. We can certainly try to start our projects later on, move monies. That's an accounting issue, a budget issue, to the next year. We believe that we would meet MOE requirements, the maintenance of effort requirements in that case. So these are all things that we can, I would say today, we can deal with. So I hope that provides some context on why we brought this forward. And there are going to be other issues that we bring forward that may seem a little out of place, but just in case things are still operating, we want to provide some level of ability to move forward on those things. Thank you.
Craig, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that, even while the world is falling apart around us, we still need to, let the cars go down the roads and stuff. So there's there is a lot of the just usual blocking and tackling that we do that we have to continue doing, at least at some level. At the same time, this is one of our largest single expenditures of the year every year. Maybe close to the top after the sheriff's contract or thereabouts. You know, I think it's definitely worth proceeding with at this point as to getting bids. But if I go to the 3 recommendations in the memo, I'm fine with number 1. I'm fine with number 2. You know, the dollar amount, sorry, with number 3, the dollar amount for number 2, though, you know, I'm looking at Howard's timeline. I think he had town manager awards contract week of May 11th. We actually happen to have a council meeting the week of May 11th on Wednesday the 13th. So I think I'd given that we don't really know yet what the financial future looks like around COVID-19, you know, as we work through that with the subcommittee of Councilwoman Wengert and myself and Jeremy and your staff, I think we'll have a clearer picture of that by the middle of May. And at that point, we can make the go, no go decision. In order to be able to make that go, no go decision, though, in May, we need to put this bid out now. So I'm comfortable putting the bid out, but holding back the approval on actually executing the project until May 13th.
Okay. I will, Jeremy can respond to that. And then we've got one more public comment. I'll take it from David Cardinal after Jeremy goes. So Jeremy's next, and then David, you can speak.
To Craig's point, so what I would suggest once the council gets to a motion, what we do here is, if I'm hearing you right, Craig, that the motion be amended to include a bringing the item back the week of May 11th, so the May 13th council meeting, to provide the council with information on the bid and a go or no go. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I think that would also include anything that we would need to know that's relevant around, you know, the what did you call it, the maintenance of effort, and yes, you know, different funding sources. So if it, you know, if it turns out that really, you know, it's only $120,000 of discretionary funds and the state's going to make us spend it anyway, that we have a better picture of that. And as I say, I think by the middle of May, we'll have better understanding around a lot of these issues than we do now. I mean, right now, you know, the state and the county have been focused on unemployment insurance and making sure elderly people are getting food and that sort of, and housing the homeless. Over the course of the next month or two, I imagine they'll be moving on to other, you know, less urgently pressing issues like, do towns get to resurface their roads ever again or not? But we'll have better visibility of that, I think, by May. So if we put the bids out now and then have it come back in May, we can make a more informed decision then.
Okay, let me take David Cardinal's comment, and then Ann and John have their hands up. David, go ahead.
Sure. Well, thanks for doing this online. My thought would be, I don't know how much discretion we have and how to spend the pavement money, but I'd be happy to drive on bumpy roads if it meant we could spend more money helping the businesses and people that have been affected by this crisis. So, you know, my vote would be, fine, I'll bump up Golden Oak or whatever. Unless it's a safety issue, I'd rather see the money go somewhere else.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that point. Jeremy, did you want to respond to that?
Just to say, I love the sentiment. Unfortunately, the majority of the funds are restricted and don't allow us to use in other places. So they're either used for the purposes of road resurfacing or something related to roads, or we don't use them.
I want there to be some flexibility on that. I'll bet if we go back in the spirit of the times, there may be some changes in the way the funds are allocated.
Around road funding, I'm not sure, for one thing. The other thing I'll add is that, you know, we talk about this fairly often. We can save, you know, $500,000 one year by not doing the roads, but every year we delay the routine maintenance. the roads suffer more damage to the point where if we delayed it too many years, we'd be talking about $2 million to restore a bunch of roads, and it's a balancing act there. I like the idea of having the flexibility, so I do appreciate the comment. I'll say it's complicated, and it's one of those things that we probably, like I would definitely would have a long conversation with Howard before I did something along those lines, but I do appreciate the idea.
Well, fair enough, but I think a lot of people think that we could be spending money on a lot of other things if we have that opportunity.
Yeah, no, I understand the point. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, Anne and John had their hands up. Anne, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we are in a most incredibly difficult time right now, and looking at any expenditure of $500,000 or more makes me very uncomfortable for some of the reasons that Dave articulated. But clearly, we've had, I think, a very long and robust discussion over the years of why these dollars typically need to get spent and aren't generally available to us on a fully discretionary basis. But what is available now is and I heard Howard say it's going to cost us $70,000 just to get the bids going. And granted, we can't just necessarily assign that to our general fund, but there's obviously a cost associated with that. So, and obviously, I think we've all identified the fact that we're going to have a very hard look at our entire financial picture once we sort of move through this period. And so my initial reaction is there not an ability to back this schedule up? So that, because I also believe there aren't going to be a lot of firms available to bid right now until basically the shelter in place and some normalcy begins to reestablish itself in all businesses in the county. We are, as Howard already identified, not all of our bidders who've typically been there are there. So I don't want to put us in the position where we spend the $70,000 to go out to bid when we're not going to get a reasonable number of bids. And from their perspective, you can see how it would be incredibly difficult to bid this right now. Nobody knows, so nobody has any idea of whether their workforce is going to be available, whether costs are going to go up because the supply chains have been interrupted in their world. So I think the uncertainty associated with all parts of this right now would suggest to me that, number one, we try and back this whole schedule up. And I'm open to suggestions of whether we tie it to, the shelter in place order being removed or, something beyond that. And then secondly, that we make sure once we do go out to bid that we do have that intermediate review by the council finally prior to the final awarding of any contract. Because at that point, we will also have a much clearer picture of what our financial future looks like.
Okay, Jeremy or Howard, do you want to respond to that comment?
Let me start. Yes, we can back it up. That's not an issue. The uncertainty is something that Howard and I have talked about fairly regularly, and I agree that we don't know what climate we're in and what this could ultimately look like. There may be challenges associated with pushing it back. If the economy comes back, we may have the same problems we've had in previous years, which is whether or not we would be an attractive place for a bid and what that would look like. But those are problems we can deal with then. So understanding with open eyes that it could cost more, I think that's a fair approach. Howard, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add on cost. And I apologize, I don't know this off the top of my head. I don't know how long the expenditures related to design would be fresh related to a future expenditure.
Okay.
And the only other thing I would add is, and this is not challenging at all, but it would we would need to come back to council to rebudget dollars. But again, that's an easy fix.
So just to dovetail on that is all true. I do want to clarify that the $70,000 to go out to bid, actually it's about around $50,000 of money already spent in the design. So it doesn't cost us much to go out to bid. It's basically the design is already done. We can push the thing further down the line. Some of the concerns would be weather. in October, November, you can't do a lot of slurry seal and a good quality job. And also in the summer, the costs go up. It could go up 10, 20% because a lot of cities start bidding out things in the summer, and a lot of schools bid things out in the summer. So we try to go out the bid a little earlier to capture, to get first in line and to get better pricing. But there is a risk of higher pricing down the road. And also at this time, because the design is done, if you push it off a little bit more or a year, the base failures that we marked out for repair may become obsolete, but those things can be addressed later on by refreshing the design, which would cost a little bit more money. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Howard. John has his hand up. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, okay. I'm in the same park as Ann. I think if there's a way we can push things back at this point, that makes sense, especially now, if I understand correctly, that the design is already completed. That seems to give us at least the long lead time preparation has already been done, and would allow us to have a little more flexibility when we actually get to a point where some of these bidders might be available and ready to go. It sounds like we're in a fairly good position at this point anyway, and I would think that I would definitely prefer to hold on to as much of our cash as possible right now, even though it is, as we say, restricted funds. If there is, and again, if there's any possibility of using those funds for other means after this, as this whole situation develops, I think it's something we ought to look into. But my inclination would be to hold off a bit.
Okay. Jeremy, did you have something you want to interject there, or do you want to wait?
Yeah, just a comment to John. The way that the staff report's currently written is that there's zero obligation to spend the majority of the dollars, period. It would only happen with the decision after the bids come in, and either that decision lies with the town manager or it could be modified to come back to the council. So there is no obligation to spend $600,000 at this point. Should we go out for bid? Just want to be clear.
I understand that, and I think that makes it reasonable to bring it back to the council, as Craig suggested.
Okay, Craig had his hand up. Why don't you go ahead, Craig?
Oh, Marianne can go first. She hasn't had a chance yet.
Okay, Marianne.
Oh, good. It unmuted. First of all, just correct me if I'm wrong. This would be, if we were going to do this whole thing and we weren't in the middle of a pandemic, it would be $120,000 out of our general fund, and the rest would be all the transportation funds who come in every year. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I sit on 2 transportation boards. Well, one's not just transportation, one is all transportation. I can tell you right now, the dedicated funds are dedicated to roads, potholes, highways, whatever. You aren't going to go back and say, hey, we'd like to use this to help our businesses. That's just not how it works. So that is a wonderful, wonderful sentiment, but in the real world, it will never fly. So I am of the mind that we should just push forward, go out, do the bids as staff has recommended. I like Craig's idea to come back in May when we have more of an idea of what the world's going to look like, and then make a decision to proceed or not.
Okay. Craig, you got to go ahead.
Yeah, one of the reasons that I kind of would like to go out to bid is that, where in normal years we face or in recent years anyway, we face the hazard of all the work crews are busy doing other jobs. There's an outside chance that some bid will come back way under the estimate here because they're desperate for work because nobody else is putting out bids. So given that the design costs are already sunk here, And going out to bid is really not going to cost us anything other than a bit of Howard's time, probably. I think getting those bids in, even if we don't act on them, so come May 13th, if we bring it to the council meeting there, we look at and all the bids are, at or over the estimate, then we'll have to think about it. But we may get some lowball offer. And I think there's not a lot of downside to putting it out to bid now. We can always put it out to bid again 6 months from now or a year from now if we decide not to proceed. But having the option to proceed, I think, would be nice come mid-May when we'll have a clearer financial picture.
Yeah, the one thing I'll add to that is that if we put the bid out now and the bids come back good, we could be keeping some crew at work. I mean, I'm getting a lot of people talking to me about, construction crews getting laid off and subcontractors getting laid off because they're just, all the work is dried up so quickly. I mean, we'd be doing our small part to keep some part of the economy afloat around here, which I think would be good for everyone. Anne had a comment. Why don't you go next? Jeremy, unless you wanted to respond to that.
No, please, Ann can go, and I'm happy to comment afterwards.
Okay.
Well, the only thing that I think I certainly understand why you would want to go out and certainly foster businesses having more business. That's not part of it. I think the question in my mind is who's home right now to really pay attention to these bids and these companies? Because if you're looking to get these out next week, which is the schedule I'm looking at right now, we're still under shelter-in-place order. And again, it at another level, it encourages some level of commerce that I don't think as a municipality is necessarily the place we want to be. And because I don't know who's doing the bids, I don't know which companies are going to be open. Obviously, a number of them aren't, and it doesn't seem like it's a fair competitive environment if some are adhering to the, or unable, either adhering to the order, to all of the orders to essentially limit all of your activities at whatever level. So I'm uncomfortable pushing ahead of at least the next level of all of the COVID activity settling into the next phase.
That's a fair point. Howard has his hand up. Go ahead, Howard.
Oh, I just wanted to clarify that the paving companies out there, under the shelter in place, their company may be closed, but they are working from home. So I can't say they're not going to submit bids. I have a feeling that we will get bids due to the work environment right now. But I just want to clarify that they are working from home.
Thank you. Mary Ann, why don't you go ahead?
I think Howard just answered my question. I wanted to know if the companies are working from home, do they have to leave their homes to come here to do the bids, or do they know this area well enough, you've worked with them enough where they're comfortable bidding without leaving their home?
There's that could happen. I would have to send some information out. The standard bid process, and once again, this is all fluid, but we would recognize social distancing by sending something out that says if you are on the bidders list, you can FedEx your bids in because they have to be opened and read out loud publicly. Or if you do show up, we will set up an outdoor area that or the community hall to recognize the social distancing requirements. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Jeremy had his hand up, and then Ann.
This conversation is similar, I think, to the ones that we've been having just around construction. And although, as I understand it, this is an essential service, making sure the roads work, there's obviously an unease about creating environments where people could be exposed. So I just thought I'd acknowledge that. And I think that approach has been one that we're using for everything that we're doing right now. So, again, it's essential, but we're obviously thinking about these things. Thanks.
Anne, why don't you go ahead?
I mean, I think Jeremy just said what I was going to say in a slightly different way, which is, to me, it seems as if we're being a little, we're talking out of both sides of our mouth to some degree, in that we are leading, or I think among the communities leading in the COVID activity and environment, and making sure that we're shutting down as much commercial activity in our town as we can. And that goes to all kinds of people that arguably could say they could come out here to do their gardening and other activities that would be within socially acceptable social distancing. But I remain very troubled by the continuation of business that would involve other people potentially having contractors or others or themselves come out and look at this project, because there's a lot of streets on it. I mean, they have to know this town well to see what they're bidding on. They're going to have to go to each of the streets that are on that list, as well as the bid alternate too. So I am not comfortable moving forward with this, frankly, until we are at least at the next stage of the COVID crisis.
Howard, did you want to comment?
No,
Okay.
no comments.
Okay. Craig, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick comment to just clarify, Howard, something that Ann kind of raised. In order to bid, do they typically actually come on site and look at the locations, or would they be essentially looking at your engineering drawings and bidding to the drawings as opposed to coming on site? And I don't know if you know that, but
Yes. So they will come on site. Everyone that bids, there's going to be multiple subcontractors. There's going to be base repairs, crack seal, slurry seal, striping. And I would suspect that these smart contractors are not just going to bid by a piece of paper, which is really risky. I would anticipate that a lot of them will come out and look at the streets and what conditions they are, how much shade there is, and where to park.
Okay. That brings me much more in line with Ann's concern. Then I didn't realize that there was such an extensive activity just to do the bidding.
Okay. John has his hand up. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I just wanted to second that notion that Howard, I would think we would not want any bidder working in town who didn't come out to the site. That would be, that's just the wrong approach. It doesn't work.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I think I really believe that Ann is correct, that we need to at least wait until we know what is coming and see if we can. We don't want to encourage people to step over the line and break the social distancing rules that we're enforcing here. So
I got to agree with you. Is there a consensus towards maybe tabling this for another meeting, or Craig, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to move that we table this to another meeting.
So let's see, our next meeting is April 13th, I believe, just after in theory, we'd have some information about this first phase of the shelter in place. Jeremy, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, to that point. So my guess would be that this gets tabled for longer than a few meetings. We did see today that the schools extended out their version of shelter in place till May 1st.
Yeah.
So, which is all fine, but I think starting to look at dates probably doesn't make much sense at this point. If we're going to table it, I think we table it indefinitely until
it gets back on the agenda through the regular agenda setting process.
Thank you.
And we keep that. Okay. I believe I would need a motion for that. Is anyone ready to make a motion? Or Mary Ann has a hand up, or no, she doesn't. Okay, Mary Ann, there you are.
I'm really loving this lower raise hand thing. This is a question for Howard and Jeremy. So what you're saying is if we table this, we're basically tabling it for the year?
Yes.
Yes. Potentially, yes, because of the way the fiscal year lines out and the expenditure of the funds.
So
Yeah.
we would moving forward, it's not an assumption. What we would do is say that we're not spending a certain amount of money related to the road. So that's both discretionary and non-discretionary funds. Then there's some follow-up conversations that I'm sure that I'll be having with Cara and some of my counterparts related to what the state may or may not do with those funds. There is something of a grace period going into next year around that, but we don't have answers to these questions at this point. It's just sort of an unknown. And then with the full acknowledgement that when the economy comes back online, we may not be able to get to a project next year because of issues related to competing with other projects, bids that are too expensive, or weather. Thank you.
Anne, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Mary Ann, why don't you continue?
Oh, okay. Well, now I lost my thread of thought. Wait. And there's not a way we could queue this up so that if on April 11th or 13th or whatever our next meeting is, if things looked better, that we could then go forward?
Well, yes, we could bring the item back to our next regularly scheduled meeting as a placeholder. So it would be substantially the same item to move forward. This is a budget issue which can be solved. It becomes whether or not they can complete the project within the fiscal year. And if they couldn't, we'd need to move some monies around. Again, doable. So we could schedule it for, what is it, April? I'm sorry, I don't have my calendar in front of me. April 8th.
April 8 and 22 are the two next ones.
We could schedule it for that meeting to see where things are. We could schedule it repeatedly until a point where there's some clarity. Thank you.
Anne, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I understand the risks we may be taking of higher bids, of weather, of, others, activity that will be robust when it finally returns. But I think the strategy of keeping it on our agenda on an ongoing basis as we're marching through COVID is the right one, is to really know that we're ready to go once once everything is in a much more normal state.
Okay, I think that's the consensus here. Craig and Mary Ann had hands up. Craig, go ahead.
Yeah, just from a procedural point of view, my preference would be, rather than having it as a regular agenda item, just leave it up to the mayor and vice mayor and town manager who set the agenda to decide when to bring it back, but to do so, when it seems appropriate, because we've got more visibility on the COVID thing. So that might be at the next meeting, but my guess is it's probably not going to be for at least 2 or 3 more meetings. But rather than having it come up every meeting and we have an item and it takes us 10 minutes to say, let's push it again, we just leave it up to the mayor to decide when to bring it back.
Okay, Mary Ann?
So what specific funding streams are coming through for this? I know SB1, what else?
I can answer.
Okay.
It's the Measure M, Measure W, Measure A. Those are the vehicle license fees, the gas tax.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
And we don't lose those funds if we can't spend them this fiscal year, correct?
That's going to take a little more response time that I will have to get back, going back to the first part where the council asked for more information concerning that and those items that Jeremy talked about. So I'll leave it off at that. We have to look at a little bit more into it to see how the state reacts to COVID-19 and what we can do. There are certain parameters of spending this money within a fiscal year or rolling it over, and how it meets the items that Jeremy talked about with the MOE.
Right. Okay. Okay. So there is a risk there, but we just got to. Yeah. My feeling is, and I think we all kind of agree on this, that it's just we are trying to set a good example with shelter in place and not pushing people to do things that are risky, and we just have to follow through with that. Jeremy, go ahead and comment. And
yeah, I think just building off what Howard said, I mean, each of these funds is going to be a little bit of a different approach. Who knows what the state's going to do. I think we all hope that there will be an enormous amount of flexibility as it relates to any of this. A week ago, I was still working with auditors to get things completed because of state deadlines when I had better things to do. So I think now we're going to be in good company. So, everyone will be dealing with this. We will not be alone in that discussion. So I'm not too concerned about that. Although we do have some difference because of when we spend the monies, at the end of the fiscal year instead of the start of the fiscal year. So, a potential scenario is that we lose access to those funds for a year, which just means we just don't do the project, which has always been an option for us because of the reasons we've discussed before, whether the bid's too high or otherwise. So it in some ways isn't a fundamental difference to what the decision process is any year. Thank you.
okay, Marianne, go ahead. You had your hand up.
On CCAG, I've seen somewhat similar situations where cities didn't spend the money on their project in the right amount of time. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. But as Jeremy mentioned, there are going to be a whole lot of people in the same situation. So it's kind of hard to predict whether or not we'd lose the funds or not.
Okay. And I think the consensus is it's a risk we're willing to take in the circumstances. If that is the case, I could take a motion to table this until the mayor, vice mayor, and manager's discretions to bring it back. Craig?
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, moved by Hughes, seconded by Wengert. Sharon, any more discussion? Okay, then Sharon, roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Wengert,
Aye.
Councilmember Richards,
Aye.
Councilmember Hughes,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Derwin,
Reluctantly, aye.
Mayor Aalfs.
Aye. Okay, the item is tabled, and we will keep an eye on the situation and bring it back when we're ready. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Howard. All right. Sorry, I'm just finding my back to the top of the agenda here. Okay. Item 8 is council liaison and agency reports. Anne, why don't you just keep our regular order for these?
I think it's been a very unusual few weeks. So no committee meetings, no regional meetings, a few on the phone coming up, but that's all I have.
Okay. John?
Same boat here, nothing to report.
Okay. Craig?
I have one from way back at the beginning of the month. I was at BPTS for the first half of the meeting. They were talking about a whole range of things, but one thing that I just wanted to bring to everybody's attention is that the sheriff's office continues to report as with their monthly report to the BPTS about the number of citations that they've issued and the range of those citations. They've now started tracking what percentage of the citations are issued to Portola Valley residents as opposed to people who are visiting town. And I think in the first month they reported the statistic was 1% PV residents. And in the month of, I guess this would have been February, it was 12% PV residents. So the vast majority of the citations that they seem to be writing are for people who are not Portola Valley residents. And I think we have discussion from time to time about, who who the bad drivers are in our community. And there's certainly, it's not to say that there aren't any bad PV residents or repeat offenders. But as far as, citations and the kind of bulk of it, it seems that most of the citations anyway are written to visitors. Other than that, I not had anything except for all the information meetings and so on that we've all been going to.
Okay, Marianne.
I have 3. The first was a Council of Cities dinner in Belmont on February 28, and that was when people were first aware that COVID-19 was percolating around because no one was hugging. Anyway, the presentation was about Zone Haven, but it was in regard to wildfires. And I guess you guys all know what Zone Haven is, right? That it's, it's an attempt to be able to evacuate people in real time using maps where every place in the county is zoned. I think Craig mentioned we have 3 zones or something like that in Portola Valley. So built into these maps is the ability to look at the behavior of fire so that they could say, okay, it looks like it's coming close to Mary Ann's house in the Westridge area. So they push that information out and the residents can evacuate before they lose power, before it's too late. So it was a really fascinating presentation. And I think it would be great if we could bring those guys or one guy to our council meeting. After we're done with this disaster, then we can move into the next disaster. And then I had a Express Lanes JPA meeting, and the only real issue on the agenda was whether to have 1 opening or 2 openings for the Express Lanes project, because one piece of it, the southern, will be done at the end of 2021 and the northern will be done at the end of 2022. So we looked at the pros and cons and decided that if we can team up with Santa Clara's opening of their Express Lanes project, we'll just do 1 opening because there's a potential for revenue, there's a potential to learn what isn't working early on, potential to change people's behavior. On the other hand, we could lose money. People might not like it. So at the end, we decided it was better to do the 2 openings and take the risk. And then the only other meeting I had was our CCAG admin meeting. I'm not really supposed to be the chair anymore, but since we canceled the March 12 meeting and the election for the new chair was on that meeting, I am still the chair. So we've got a meeting coming up, which will be entirely on Zoom. And I'm looking forward to that. That's all I've got.
Okay, thank you. I had, the ad hoc fire committee met on the 4th and identified some new tasks to take on. One was we wanted to continue our conversation with insurance carriers. We got a little more information from some of them and wanted to follow up with them in terms of just trying to make sure people can keep their coverage and we don't have sort of these loss of coverages that we've been hearing about as much, or we find the carriers that are actually good at comfortable underwriting coverage out here and sort of cultivate them. We talked a bit about, so Hillsborough has passed a WUI ordinance, a wildlife urban interface ordinance, and we were looking at some elements of that, something we could consider here. We don't officially have one. Jeremy, correct me if I got the details of that wrong. So we identified some subcommittee tasks. One was around insurance carriers and one was around elements of the WUI ordinance and working with the fire district on our, either a WUI ordinance or modifications to our fire codes going forward. The only other thing I'll mention is, Nature and Science has been working on, they put out a really kind of cool flower scavenger hunt as an entertainment item for people that are sheltering in place. They talked a bit about sort of ideas for foraging, and we kind of realized, do we want people going out and well, two concerns. One is, do people want people misidentifying things that are not actually edible, and others, do we want people sort of overhunting certain things out there? But it was a good discussion, and they've actually come up with several. They're coming up with ways for people to enjoy themselves even when they can't spend time together. So Nature and Science is actually stepping up and doing some cool things there. Other than that, that's all I have. And so, Jeremy, did you have Jeremy's report is up next.
I don't have a report, but I do have an item that I wanted to.
Oh, sorry.
Before we
Greg
go,
has his
I
hand
just had a question. As we become more sort of familiar with Zoom and we have the town Zoom account set up and so on, are we planning to kind of try and reopen some of the committees that we have, such as Nature and Science, or provide tools to help them meet virtually? I think there's also been some efforts from Cultural Arts and some other things to get some stuff going that people could dial into or otherwise participate in while they are stuck at home. And I was just curious if there's anything on that. Maybe Jeremy, you can talk about that in your report.
Craig, you literally read my report. Very impressive. I wanted to share with you that we have heard from a couple committees who are interested in doing some virtual meetings, which we're happy to support. We haven't talked internally as a team on how we can support that exactly, because it does take a little bit of time to set these things up. We do have a lot of obviously very smart people in town who could do this on their own. I'm certainly inclined to move that forward, give people something to do. There's important work that needs to happen. So unless there's an objection from any council members, I'll start the conversation more officially with my team. What really triggered it was EPC. We canceled that meeting, and Chris, their chair, asked about this, and I told him that I'm sure the council won't have any issue with it, but let me just run it by him. Thanks.
Okay. Christy Corley has her hand up. Christy, you have a quick question? You may need to unmute yourself. Christy, we can't hear you. I'm not sure. Oh, there you are. Okay.
I'm sorry, that was a mistake.
No worries. Go ahead. Oh, sorry. Are you saying the hand up was a mistake?
Yes.
Oh, got it. Okay. Okay. I thought you were saying. Okay. Jeremy, you were done with your report?
Yeah, that was it. Thank you.
Okay. That moves us to the digests. Any comments on the digest from February 27th?
No.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through the next digest item. March 5th, anything to pull? Okay, March 12th, everything's canceled. Okay. March 19th.
Just to commend the mayor again for his fantastic letter in item 3.
Thank you, and thank you to staff for the help in putting all this together, and really all these messages, to be honest. So it's been very much a team effort. Okay. Anything else on that last digest? And if not, we are done.
I would move adjournment.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any opposed? And motion carries. All right. Thank you all. Thank you to the members of the public for bearing with us. We'll be looking for ways to make this work more smoothly and even better in the future. But again, thanks for your patience, and we will let you know. Our next meeting is in 2 weeks. We'll have more details to follow. Again, thank you and good night.
Stay well, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.